Every few years, the most powerful government on earth simply stops paying its own bills. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are told to stay home. National parks lock their gates. Food inspections slow down. Passport offices stall. And the country that runs the world's largest economy grinds, at least partly, to a halt. It's called a government shutdown. And here's the strange part. Almost nobody actually wants it to happen. Not the workers who lose their paychecks. Not the public. Often, not even the politicians who trigger it. So why does it keep happening, again and again, like clockwork? To understand that, you have to understand a quiet rule buried deep inside the American system. A rule that turns a routine piece of paperwork into a loaded weapon. Let's start with the basics, because this is where most people get lost. The United States government does not fund itself automatically. Unlike a household with a standing subscription, or a company that keeps running as long as money is in the account, Congress has to actively approve federal spending. Usually once a year. This approval comes in the form of bills called appropriations. If those bills pass, the government keeps the lights on. If they don't pass by the deadline, the machine doesn't just slow down. Legally, it has to stop. The reason is a law most Americans have never heard of. It's called the Anti-Deficiency Act, and its roots go back to the 1800s. The idea behind it was actually reasonable. Congress didn't want government agencies spending money that lawmakers had never approved. So the law says something simple, but brutal in practice. No funds approved, no spending allowed. An agency cannot legally spend a single dollar it hasn't been given. For most of American history, this was treated as a technicality. If funding lapsed for a few days, agencies mostly kept working and sorted out the paperwork later. Then, in the early 1980s, that changed. A series of legal opinions reinterpreted the law far more strictly. The new interpretation was blunt. If the money isn't there, the work must actually stop. Employees can't keep working on the promise of getting paid later. Overnight, a dusty accounting rule became something much more powerful. A hard switch that could shut off large parts of the federal government. And once that switch existed, it didn't take long for politicians to notice what it was really good for. Because here's the key insight. That funding deadline is not just a deadline. It's leverage. Both parties know a shutdown causes real pain and dominates the headlines. So the funding bill, the thing that keeps the entire government running, becomes a kind of hostage. One side attaches a demand. Fund my priority, or I'll block yours, and I'll let the whole thing expire. The other side refuses, and attaches demands of its own. And suddenly, a boring, routine budget vote turns into a game of chicken, with the entire federal workforce strapped into the passenger seat. So why would any rational politician play this game, knowing the damage it causes? Because the incentives reward it. In a deeply divided Congress, looking tough often matters more than actually getting a deal. A lawmaker who forces a shutdown over a cause their base cares about can raise enormous amounts of money. They can dominate the news cycle for weeks. They can go home and say, truthfully, that they fought as hard as they possibly could. And the cost of that fight, the missed paychecks, the closed offices, the delayed services, mostly lands on other people. That gap, between who takes the risk and who pays the price, is the engine that keeps shutdowns alive. The person pulling the trigger is almost never the person who gets hit. But here's something most people get completely wrong. During a shutdown, the government doesn't actually close. Not all of it. Instead, it splits its own workforce into two categories, with two very different fates. The first group is labeled essential. Air traffic controllers, border agents, active duty military, federal law enforcement. These people keep working because sending them home would be dangerous or even catastrophic. But here's the cruel twist. Many of them keep working without pay, at least until the shutdown ends. They show up, do critical jobs, and watch their bank account stall. The second group is labeled non-essential. And that label is doing a lot of heavy lifting, because it covers everyone from scientists to park rangers to the clerks who process passports and small business loans. These workers are furloughed, sent home, told not to check their email, told, in effect, that their job is a bargaining chip in someone else's fight. Now think about what that word, non-essential, actually does to a person. Imagine being told by your own employer that your work can simply be switched off, indefinitely, because two groups of politicians can't agree. That psychological cost never shows up in the official numbers. But it's real, and it's part of why experienced federal workers quietly leave for the private sector, taking years of expertise with them. So what does all of this cost? The answer is far bigger than most people imagine. Past shutdowns have drained billions of dollars from the American economy. Some of that money is eventually recovered when workers get back pay. But a lot of it is gone for good. Small businesses that depend on tourists near national parks lose weeks of income they never get back. Government contractors, unlike federal employees, often receive no back pay at all. They simply eat the loss. Delays ripple outward through the entire system. Loan approvals freeze. Regulatory reviews pile up. Research projects lose momentum that takes months to rebuild. And every single time, there's a quieter cost that's harder to measure. Trust. Each shutdown chips away at the basic assumption that the government will simply function. That your paycheck will arrive. That the office will be open. When a country's own institutions can't guarantee that, something in the machine starts to rust, slowly, permanently. Which brings us to the obvious question. If shutdowns are this damaging, this expensive, and this unpopular with almost everyone, why hasn't the system just been fixed? On paper, the fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Several proposals over the years would make funding automatic. The idea works like this. If Congress fails to pass a budget by the deadline, spending simply continues at the previous year's level. No drama. No hostage. No shutdown. The government keeps running while lawmakers keep arguing, which is exactly what you'd want. And yet, these proposals keep dying in committee, year after year. Why? The answer is the same answer that explains almost everything in Washington. The people with the power to remove the weapon are the very same people who benefit from keeping it. Think about it from their perspective. The shutdown threat is leverage. It's one of the few tools a minority in Congress has to force the other side to the table. Take that threat away, make funding automatic, and you take away the leverage. And leverage, in politics, is not something anyone gives up willingly. So the reform that would help almost every ordinary person keeps losing to the reform that would help the people who write the rules. Which is to say, it keeps losing. So let's step back and look at the whole picture. A shutdown looks, from the outside, like a system breaking down. Chaos. Dysfunction. A government that can't get its act together. But that's not quite right. Look closer, and you see something more unsettling. The shutdown isn't the system failing. It's the system working exactly as its incentives are designed to allow. A routine bill, turned into a threat, by people who rarely feel the consequences themselves, protected by a rule that no one with power actually wants to change. Every piece is doing its job. The result is just terrible for everyone standing outside the room. So the next time you hear that the government is about to shut down, and you will hear it again, try to see past the drama. You're not watching an accident. You're watching a machine do precisely what it was quietly built to allow. The paychecks that freeze, the workers labeled non-essential, the parks that close, none of it is a glitch. It's a feature. A predictable, repeatable feature of a system where the people holding the match are almost never the ones who get burned. And until those incentives change, until the cost finally lands on the people making the decision, the shutdown will keep coming back. Right on schedule. Just like it always has. Now I'm curious what you think. Should funding be made automatic, taking the weapon off the table entirely? Or does that leverage actually serve a purpose, forcing compromises that would never happen otherwise? Let me know in the comments. And if this helped the whole thing finally make sense, consider subscribing, because next time, we're going to look at another piece of this machine that almost